Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to today's conversation. I am joined by Dr. Mpeta here. There are some of you who have joined in the conversation who know Dr. Mpeta very well, but there are some who may not know Dr. Mpeta very well. So, Dr. Mpeta, I'll probably ask you to introduce yourself at some point. But before we even go any further, I mean, of course, we have to also wait for more people to join in into this conversation. Now, if you are just joining us, please tell us where you are watching us from and also tell us if our volume is okay. And as you join, please continue to tag others and invite others. It's very important that we get as many people into this conversation as possible because of the many questions that have been raised regarding this COVID-19 issue, the vaccines, the variants, these travel bans, and mandatory testing. So today I have Dr. Mpeta with me, and we will do our best to go through all these issues together. And then also at some point to ask you to throw in some of your questions. Now, Dr. Mpeta, how are you?
I'm all right, Dr. Mjati. How are you?
Very good. It's good to see you. How is Lesotho?
Lesotho at the moment is fine. The weather is fantastic. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And how is the WHO?
We are staying afloat, keeping vigil, especially with this announcement of Omicron. We don't know which direction it will go, but we are hoping for the best and just putting every systems in place so that we can handle it. Yeah.
Right. Now, Dr. Mpeta, very quickly, could you, of course, most members who follow this page by now, they know who you are, but we're not going to take anything for granted, just in case there are people who are joining us for the first time. So just go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, so my name is Francis Peter. I'm an infectious disease specialist. Basically, everything infectious, from HIV, TB, malaria, and more recently with, this emergence of SARS-CoV-2. And I've worked at the front lines. I've worked also in systems development for various countries. And we are currently supporting different countries just to ensure that we put systems in place that will be resilient for, managing each and every COVID waves, and just advising different governments on how we can overcome and, and make sure that we bring to an end this pandemic, which has really disturbed, the entire world.
Right. Now, of course, at present moment, the main focus for today's conversation, we are discussing COVID. But again, there's still another very important pandemic that is being commemorated today. Today is World AIDS Day. What's your message as WHO and as Dr. Mpeta on this very important day?
Well, I think the UN AIDS, goal for targets for 2020 is to ensure that we, attain epidemic control and end HIV in our generation. And thus, there are several targets that have been, placed on countries. That is 95, 95, 95, ensuring that 95% of, people with HIV are actually identified, and out of those 95% are placed on life-prolonging antiretroviral drugs, and then ensuring that out of those 95% are virally suppressed. And it's only if viral suppression is achieved that we reduce transmission rates, and hence most people have been talking about undetectable is equal to untransmissible, which is really based on evidence that if one is, sustained viral suppression, there's virtually no transmission of infection in almost different settings, including vertically mother to child or horizontally through heterosexual or homosexual, sexual intercourse.
Right. So I think I will invite you back to come and discuss issues to do with HIV. we will spend most of the month of December looking at HIV, it being an important month with regards to HIV. Now, today, in this moment, we are discussing COVID-19. And you saw what happened recently. But then, let's take the thorny issues out of the way with regards to COVID before we go into the deeper details of it. We saw the emergence of this Omicron variant, and we also saw the reaction of the Western world with regards to Southern Africa on the position they have taken with regards to travel bans and things like that. What is your position, Dr. Mpeta, on this issue? What's your take on that? I know a lot of people have reacted to this. Some presidents have reacted to it. I mean, I have my own opinion. What's your take?
Yeah, it's actually very, very unfortunate. What is even more unfortunate is actually other African countries treating, each other in the similar way that the Western world has treated, Southern Africa. WHO has issued a very strong statement condemning such, moves by the Western countries. Equally, Africa CDC has issued such a stern warning as well, condemning that. So COVID-19, control measures are well known and based on solid scientific evidence. So therefore, moves that are meant to, act emotionally or based on disadvantaging, especially, certain populations like here in Southern Africa where poverty levels are quite high, and cutting off from the rest of the world are really unjustified. So the discovery of, Omicron in South Africa does not mean that, the entire world the entire Southern Africa should be cut off. It just simply means that the surveillance systems are working, and the Western world should be proud that, certain countries where they have built capacity, these systems are working. And if we know Botswana was one of the first one, and South Africa just made it easier in how to identify, this variant of concern. So really, the move is premature. If we look at some of the countries that are included on the red lists, like Zambia and many others, haven't even, detected Omicron. So it's really, really unjustified. And what is worse is some of the African regions also alienating the southern region, which is quite unfortunate. And I think the Africa Union should really, act in this so that we, we have a free movement of people, and then issues of control should be based on scientific evidence, of which this is in public domain.
So could you just repeat your point? You are saying that there is no Omicron variant in Zambia at present moment. Please emphasize on that.
At the present moment, and genomic surveillance in Zambia for COVID is placed in a public domain called Next Strain or GSID. So if you look at what has been placed there, the Omicron is not appearing. And trust me, this is a transparent platform where anyone can actually access and see what sort of variants are being detected in what country, at what point, and in what proportion. So as I speak today, unless things really have only changed now, but the last time we checked, there was no such a detection in Zambia. And as have we seen, the cases of COVID remain really low at the moment in Zambia and most Southern African, countries, save for South Africa, which is seeing, a rise in cases only in one province. South Africa, mind you, has got, is it 10 or 11 provinces? So it's really, really, unfortunate that such punitive measures are being imposed in the entire Southern African region when what has been detected is only in one but a very small province of South Africa.
Now, let's talk about this province of South Africa where, cases are rising. Which variant is rising there? Is it Omicron or is it a different variant?
Yeah, so we know that from the third wave, the predominant variant for almost, the entire world was actually Delta. Now, what South Africa started seeing is the emergence of Omicron. Right now, it hasn't really taken over to be the majority or the dominant, variant, but there are indication of fast spreading, of this variant. Now, it's always important that we take caution in the interpretation of this data. So even though Gauteng is seeing, this rise in cases, the early detection of Omicron is based on certain signatures that are observed on PCR. And this could actually equally signify other variants, which could be either of concern or interest or really of no consequence. So until we really see the proper genomic surveillance and to ascertain the level at which it is, what we have now are just certain flags that are giving us to a possibility that it's really spreading at a faster rate than the other variants. But that is not cast, in concrete to say this is it.
Right. So the numbers for COVID, from what you're saying, both in South Africa, of course, there's a slight rise in numbers of COVID in South Africa, although confined to one region. But you're also saying that the numbers for COVID-19, even here in Zambia, the numbers are still very low. That's what you're saying.
Are still very low. And one can easily check on the Ministry of Health Facebook page where daily updates are given. And those are accurate information as reported by the Ministry of Health.
Okay. So now, this particular variant, the Omicron one, of course, when a member of the public is consuming this information, both from mainstream media and also from their own reading, we are seeing that you do have this same variant in Europe. Now, which parts of Europe have the Omicron in terms of big numbers?
So the UK itself has detected a few cases. There have been reports in the Netherlands, and there have been reports in even outside Europe, Europe such as Hong Kong. So, and remember, for you to start seeing a specific, variant, it actually has kind of a trail when, you study the genomics changes of these. And for it to take root to a point where you start seeing this, in people, it means that it probably started, about 2 to 3 months from the time of detection. Now, if you look at Botswana, it has now given further information that this variant was actually detected in diplomats that traveled from West Africa. They were quarantined and they actually tested all their contacts, and they haven't actually seen this Omicron in the contacts. So meaning that it was, an imported, variant, and equally several other places. But there have been reports that actually some European countries might actually reported the Omicron or detected the Omicron way earlier than South Africa. And this actually now makes us question, why didn't they actually alert WHO to this existence? Or is it that they could not actually discern that it's a new variant, and then it only had to take South African scientists to do so? So it's really sending a wrong signal and mixed, reactions based on the fact that what we thought was brilliance of science at display by Southern African region in the name of South Africa is now being punished with restrictions. We hope that the powers be will start, looking at the evidence and the science with regards to the control of, variants of concern, so that they could reverse some of these, unfortunate kind of, restrictions.
Right. Now, let's get into the science of it now. How do these variants come about? So the dominant variant right now is Delta, and WHO, which you work for, has told us that they've changed the naming for these variants. They are now using Greek letters to name the variants. There's this Omicron, which has been, elicited or described or discovered by the South African scientists. Now, how do these variants come about?
Okay, so we have to understand that every organism actually undergoes, undergoes mistake in their reproduction. Okay, human beings undergo these mistakes. Viruses as well, undergo these mistakes as they are being produced. Now, what we see in humans is that humans, being a complex organism, they have got a certain, check mechanism, a proofreading that's able to, stop the process if there's a mistake, correct it, and then continue. And that's why we end up with, like human beings. But it's never 100% proof. There are certain mistakes. And because we exist in different environments, we tend to start adapting to the environment where we are. If we look at, as Africans, we have adapted for the African condition, which is sunny, by developing a lot of melanin, and then there are certain people who live in temperate climates and cold climates. They don't have as much melanin as we do. So those are some of the adaptative changes, and with time, they actually became permanent changes. Now, when you look at a virus, it's a very tiny, piece of genetic material. It doesn't have the same proofreading as we do. So when it starts being replicated or being multiplied, mistakes are being made. And these mistakes, there's no system to correct it. So once a mistake is made, it's passed on to the, copy of the new viron. And when it comes out, it will have different characteristics, from its parent. Because of that, the virus actually does this in the similar way that humans want to adapt to a certain environment. So they also undergo mutation because of a certain environmental pressure, okay, which they are trying to overcome. So if the immunity is that pressure, then they are going to, develop these changes so as to overcome or escape the pressure from the immunity. If that pressure is a drug, then they are going to do the same, so that now you come up with a new, strain, which is drug resistance. I'm sure we have heard of drug resistance malaria, drug resistance TB, and also HIV. It's because of applying external pressure from the drugs that they actually tend to change and adapt to the new environment. Now, these changes, all right, in a virus, we are able to see them in a short period of time because it's only a small organism. In bigger organisms like mammals, it may take actually even 1,000 to 1,000,000 years to see these, genetic changes. So that's basically what happens. Now, what are the consequences of, these changes, either to humans or to the virus? Let's start with the virus itself. So remember, the basic reason why it's changing, it's so that it's able to adapt to the harshness of the environment it's in, whether it's the pressure from drugs or whether it's the pressure from the immunity of humans. So once it does that, then it's able to evade the immune system or the drug pressure. Now, these mutations will have also consequences, especially on the human being. It's either the virus now acquires new characteristics where it's able to easily transmit from one host to the next, like in the case of Delta, where we knew that it was, infecting people much at a higher rate compared to Alpha and Beta, or it may actually start escaping the immunity, Now, how do they actually escape the immunity? So equally escaping the immunity is also coupled with failure for the test that we have developed for that virus to detect it. Now, how does it escape the immunity, or how does it, escape the testing capability that we have developed? Now, let me give you an example. In today's technology, we have got, facial recognition, TV, phones, and many different gadgets. Now, imagine that you are from fighting Mike Tyson and he really, really clobbers you after 12 rounds. And then you attempt to, operate one of these gadgets. It's going to fail to recognize certain facial features because of the swollen face. All right. So that's basically what happens to the virus. Because of the external pressures that it faces, it's equally, can be interpreted that it's been in a fight with Mike Tyson for 12 rounds, and it has been given, blows to the face so much that when it comes out, it's so swollen, and the facial recognition, which in this case is the immunity, fails to detect the certain patterns that it knows this virus has. So therefore, the immunity doesn't act because it's something that it feels it's not foreign. Equally, it's the same where the facial recognition, software fails to recognize this new face and the gadget doesn't open. It's the same as the testing. So the testing, platforms pick certain signatures on the virus, and then it's able to say this is SARS-CoV-2 and this is the variant. But when it's hammered by Mike Tyson and its face is changed, the test will not able to recognize it as the same because of the changes on its face. So this is what happens when the mutations occur, and these are the consequences of the mutations. Now, a lot of people are thinking there's somebody making these viruses. No. All right. Every virus, every bacteria by nature mutates. And this mutation can be of consequence, like I've said, or they will be of no consequence. When they are of no consequence, it's fine. When they are of consequence, then we get worried. And some of these mutations can also be at the cost of the virus. It can lose its ability to infect others, or it can become more deadly. All right. So it all depends on which direction that adaptation follows. And that's what's going to, be interpreted whether it's of consequence or not.
Interesting. You've introduced a very interesting word, Dr. Mpeta. You have said that when the virus is changing or when the variants are coming up, these variants, some of them are very consequential on the host, which is the patient themselves. Some of them are consequential on the virus itself. Now, let's discuss this issue of consequential. Let's take this Omicron virus itself, the Omicron variant itself. What sort of features, what sort of clinical presentation is it presenting? Is it more severe than the previous mutation, which is Delta, or it's less severe? What are we looking at with the Omicron, the new variant?
Yeah, so remember that, the Omicron variant is at the moment just detected in a few people. And I think at the point of first report, we had barely 100 people. Now, and these people who were infected, some of them were vaccinated, some of them were young. Now, from what we know about, COVID is that the vaccinated usually do not develop their, clinical consequences. And then the young people also seem to be somehow spared. So it's very difficult for us to, exactly know the extent to which these patients are going to present until we have got enough cases, probably over 1,000 or so, for us to really characterize what will be the exact clinical course of this disease. Now, that suffice to say, let's get back to the virus itself and what we know. So remember that a virus has got certain signatures. I'll give an example of if, a boxer comes back home after a fight without any, lumps on the face, meaning that they won. And you find that winning is associated with celebration. So you find that they'll be able to celebrate and people will be happy. Now, imagine if a boxer comes with, a swollen eye where they can't see. It will indicate that, this could have been rather a bad fight and they were maybe clobbered. So equally with the virus, we are able to look at these mutations that they develop as the consequences of being exposed to pressure. Now, if we see that the face looks the same without major changes, then we know, we can't be worried about this. But if it comes with a swollen eye, a certain mutation on the viral genome, we'll be able to remember that if this is coming up, it means that one of the characteristics this virus is going to have is that it's going to easily transmit. If we see another type of change on the face of the virus, we'll be able to predict that this change is associated with tests failing to pick it, then certain changes on the face will be able to say this, it will be able to escape the immunity. So once we look at the structure of that virus, because of the past experience we have developed over the past 2 years, we are able to predict what the consequences of these changes on the virus are going to be. Now, remember, we say that in vitro and in vivo experiences are different. So you might have these signature changes on this virus, but you find that in the long run, actually don't have the same consequences that you anticipated. I'll give an example. A few months, I think just about 2 or 3 months ago, in South Africa, another variant was detected, which is called C12. C12 had certain signatures that it could indicate it was able to, spread fast and also cause severe disease. But look at what happened to C12. It actually died a natural death. South Africa is not detecting it. Zambia did not even detect it. And several other Southern African countries who did not detect it. But it was detected in several other countries. But it hasn't had the same impact as the signature it had. So having certain signatures on the virus, which tells us that the consequences might be this, when it comes to the actual, infection, it might not be the same or exactly as you anticipated. So that's why what we are saying about Omicron is that, yes, it has got these signatures, which tells us that this virus or this variant is of concern because it can actually fail to detect, certain tests. We are glad that South Africans have actually devised a way of picking this, variant based on the certain pattern on the tests. Then it could escape the immunity and easy transmissibility. But we don't know if this is really going to be. If you look at some of the experiences with clinicians and personal testimonies, this is not yet published data. They are saying that they have just seen, mild symptoms, and some of the most common being a fatigue. But we cannot rely on, just personal testimonies until we are able to collect a large enough sample of data and then analyze it, then be able to advise exactly what the clinical consequences are going to be.
Dr. Mpeta, has anyone died from Omicron so far?
So far, that data has not been shared, but from what the clinicians who have experienced it, they have said that most of the patients actually who are ending up in hospital are being discharged. The majority are actually just being managed from home. So we are yet to see if the increase in hospitalization in some of the countries like, the UK, where this has been, detected, whether it's the one that is responsible or indeed the previous, Delta variant. We are yet to know until this data is analyzed.
Right. Now, Dr. Mpeta, one of the things, before we start taking questions from people who are, following this conversation between you and me right now, has to do with when these mutations are coming up, with regards to vaccinations. Should people still go ahead and get vaccinated? That's one question on one hand. But before we get to that question, the issue I need you to address is this. What impact do these mutations have on the vaccine?
Okay.
Generally speaking.
All right. So remember that the vaccine really is to provoke the immune system. And this immune system then, defeats the virus. Now, like I said, if the virus, is exposed to certain pressure, it develops certain adaptive means, including escaping the immunity. Now, this immunity could be the natural immunity from the body or the one that is induced by the virus. Now, the reason why we have named these variants as variants of concern, it's because we have noticed that some of them are capable of escaping the immunity. So it becomes a concern to us humans. Some of them are able to elude, or evade the diagnostic tests. It's a concern for us if we have developed a test and the test can't pick. Some of them are able to transmit easily, and some of them are able to cause severe disease. So these are the parameters that, if we observe that this virus is able to do, it becomes a variant of concern. So now, when we look at these variants that are labeled of concern, it can do either one or more of the things that I've talked about. So for Omicron, after studying the signatures that it has certain signatures that we know previous viruses, once they have these signatures, they are of a concern to us. Now, because we haven't had so much experience with it, it's really an expectation that it will cause these consequences, but time will tell. And that's why we are just trying to get, ready for it. Now, for those that are able to escape the immunity, it has been shown that vaccine immunity is actually reduced. Its effectiveness is reduced if this variant is there. So instead of just having probably a mild disease, some of them can actually develop a severe disease. But the good part is that vaccines differs in the way they act to the natural immunity. Vaccine actually have got certain additives which are called adjuvants. Now, adjuvants are also able to provoke the immunity further. I'll give an example of, if you go in a fight, one comes with his brothers and sisters, and then one just comes alone. The one who comes with, brothers and sisters is likely going to win, because there will be other people either giving him morale or even assisting in, throwing the punches. That's what vaccine immunity does. It comes with this cocktail, of chemicals that, apart from the active ingredient in the vaccine, they also assist in provoking the immunity. So that makes the vaccine immunity to be more effective than the natural immunity. So even when it's reduced, it's still able to work because of the certain, plethora effects of these, additives. Now, if we have seen the experience from Delta, the natural immunity actually is significantly reduced in terms of its effect on Delta, but vaccines are still working. Why? Because of these certain properties that vaccines have that makes them provoke the immunity beyond what the natural means would. And that's why, even with Omicron, we anticipate that even though it will escape the immunity, it won't be to the extent of making the vaccines that we have at the moment useless. So there's no evidence to suggest that we are going to throw away these vaccines, and people should continue taking these vaccines so that they prevent or deaths or severe disease. And actually, that is the basic, principle of a vaccine. Most people think vaccines are made to prevent infection. No, that's just one of the benefits that we can get if you get a vaccine. But the majority of vaccines are meant to prevent severe disease and death. I'll give an example of, BCG. It doesn't mean when you get BCG, then you won't get TB. All right. What it does is to prevent the severe form of TB in childhood. And that's why we've seen now a lot of children are able to survive beyond the 5th birthday because of some of these vaccines that we give that are able to prevent severe disease and death. Before vaccines, there was high infant mortality because of these infections.
So, from your explanation, you are saying that yes, the Omicron variant has come, and that we should expect more variants to come along. And at present moment, you are confident that the current vaccines that we have available should do very well, even if the Omicron were to arrive. I mean, of course, you said that there's no Omicron in Zambia at present moment, but the current vaccines should be fine. Now, there's one question everyone keeps asking about vaccines, and I need you to really emphasize on this one. What is the benefit of vaccination? What do vaccines do? What are they for? Because most people argue that vaccines, I read a paper recently, I won't mention by which organization, Their argument was on the basis that vaccines prevent someone from acquiring the infection. But again, you and me know that that's not the case. Now, I need you to explain what are the benefits of getting vaccinated? What do these vaccines actually do? And why should people actually, get vaccinated? What are they for?
All right. Thank you very much. So, the benefits of vaccine are actually twofold. And the one and most important, basically, it's a personal benefit and a societal or community benefit. As an infectious disease specialist, I'll say the most important is the societal benefit. All right, let me explain. So, when you are faced with a disease, okay, that disease in its natural occurrence, if it's virulent, it's going to wipe out almost the entire population of humans. All right. So the only way that you're going to defeat it is if you have immunity at population level or at community level well enough to actually overcome the virulence of this disease. And this is actually what is termed to as herd immunity. So once you attain herd immunity as a community, then the infection is eradicated. Okay. This is what happened to smallpox. This is what has happened to polio recently. All right. Because the huge number of people have been vaccinated against, and hence, the disease is defeated or it's eliminated. So that's one thing. The other benefit, at society level is that apart from defeating the infection together or an epidemic together, you also lower the costs associated with treating that disease, all right? The cost associated with preventing that disease. Like we know now, once a wave comes, there are lockdowns. People can't sell, people can't trade, people can't buy. That's a cost. It's a huge cost to the economy. It's a huge cost at household level. So for me, the ability by humans to prevent disease at community level actually supersedes the personal, benefits. And that is the most important role of a vaccine and the greatest invention of the 21st century. It's being able to control disease at population level. Hence, we have got the perpetuation of the human race. Now, if we look at the personal level is that a good vaccine is able to give you a number of benefits. One, the most important role of a vaccine to a human at a personal level is prevention of dying from that particular infectious disease. Okay? Everybody wants to live. Why would you want to die? Or because you are the flu, Now, if you get a vaccine, it's able to prevent death. It's as good as it comes. Anything else is secondary benefit. Now, what are the secondary benefit at a personal level? All right. If you happen to get a disease, a good vaccine should be able to prevent you from developing the severe form of the disease. All right. And this severe form will result in you being hospitalized, being put on oxygen, or being put on an artificial breathing machine called a ventilator. If it's able to prevent that, that's a very good additional benefit from dying. So that's another second, benefit. Now, another, tertiary benefit actually at personal level, it's where if you are exposed to this infection, you are infected, you actually don't develop disease at all. You are infected, but you don't have symptoms. All right. That's an additional benefit. So if the vaccine is able to reach to this extent, then it has already qualified to be an excellent vaccine because it's able to eliminate signs of disease, even if somebody has got the virus. Now, the full benefit of a vaccine as an addition, it's where if you are exposed to a disease, you actually don't get infected at all. meaning the virus, the moment it gets in, the immunity is able to clear it, as fast as it enters. Now, very few vaccines are able to do this. Very few. The majority of the vaccines prevent death primarily, and that's the goal that we should focus on. You get vaccinated, there are almost 100% chances that you are not going to die if you were to be infected or even develop severe disease. The next benefit is that you won't be admitted, or you have mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. And then the last one is where you don't actually even get infected, but very few vaccines are able to attain that.
Right. So, just for clarity, what you have said is that the vaccine does not stop you from getting infected.
Not at all.
Whether you are vaccinated or you are not vaccinated, in terms of susceptibility to infection, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated are equal. They will both get infected if they are exposed. But the point of departure is that the vaccinated people are less likely to die compared to the people who are not vaccinated. Is that your point?
That's the most important function of a vaccine. If it's able to differentiate people primarily, whether they die or not, that's the most important. And if you look at the COVID vaccines that we have, most of them in clinical trials actually had 100%, prevention of death. So they are as good as they come. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean they'll end here. They will have additional benefits that will make us happy. Like if you get infected, you'll get sick, but you won't get sick enough to go to the hospital. Or if you get infected, you won't have sick, you won't even miss work, but you are sick or you are infected. And then a few of them will actually prevent you from ever developing the infection at all. A few. Yeah.
Now,
so those kind of steps on the ladder of how the benefits accrue as you get infected. And for you to actually get all the full benefits, there are certain circumstances that will actually facilitate that. Let's look at the age. The younger ones are more likely going to have the full benefits of a vaccine than the elderly. The people who have got, more medical conditions might not really get all the full benefits up to prevention of infection. The people who have got cancer, the people who have got hypertension, HIV, TB, and all these other diseases might not get the full benefit. Now, to overcome that, that's why we say it's important for any vaccine to be repeated so that the development of the immunity is additive. All right. And that's why we've got the concept of booster doses. I don't know if you were about to ask, at booster doses, but let me preempt that question. All right.
Yes, we are coming to that question.
Okay.
Because the next question I was going to ask you is this. You see, you have vaccines where you're just giving one shot, and you have vaccines where you're giving two shots. Now, before we get, okay, fine, let's address this issue before I ask my question. So go on. You have these vaccines where you're giving one shot. I know Johnson & Johnson, you're giving one shot. AstraZeneca, you're giving two shots. So can you walk us through this booster shot issue? Why do vaccines need to be boosted, and which of these vaccines require a boost?
All right. So as we speak today, there are over 120 vaccines in various stages of development for COVID. And I think about 10 or 12 of these have already been approved and they're already being used. Some of them are a single shot vaccine. Some of them are a double dose vaccine. Now, why are vaccines made in this way? So it all depends on the primary material that has been used to make this vaccine and the additive material I talked about. So some of them will be enough to provoke immunity to a certain level, so much that probably just one shot is going to do. But the majority of them will need actually, 2 or 3 doses for them to provide sufficient benefit to actually prevent death, hospitalization, and all that. Let me take a leaf from what we already know and what already exists. If you look at a child's under 5 card, there is an immunization schedule. How many times do our children get, immunized? Okay. If we look at OPV, polio, it's a series of 3, doses. If we look at hepatitis B, DPT, and this one for diarrhea, rotavirus, those are a series of, vaccines. All right. But if we look at measles is given when? Once at 9 months. All right. Now, the reason in difference is, first of all, the viruses being addressed are different. There are some who, when you give a vaccine, immunity will start waning down. So before it completely goes down, you give another one, more or less like to boost it, to wake it up. And then you give another one. And after you give a series of 3 or 4, you find that the immunity now remains awake for a longer period of time, sometimes even up to a lifetime. All right. Now, if you give measles, it's a virus that doesn't easily change and the immunity doesn't wane so fast. That's why one shot of a measles vaccine is likely going to give you a lifelong immunity. Everything remaining equal, you might not need a repeat. And that's why if you see, you get infected with measles once, you develop lifelong immunity and you never be infected again. And that's why even the vaccine is able to replicate that. That happens in nature. Now, coronaviruses, okay, and I think I'd said this last year, a crocodile, Dr. Mjajati, is a crocodile, whether it's in Kafue River, it's in Kariba, or in Bangweulu. All right? Under certain circumstances, you provoke it, it's going to chew you and it's going to eat you. All right? So it's the same. Coronaviruses are coronaviruses, whether it's SARS-CoV-2 or whether it's the seasonal coronavirus. So what do I mean by this? All coronavirus, once you get infected, the immunity is not sustained. That's why you are able to have a cold 3 or 4 times in a year. Okay? But it's not possible to have measles 2 or 3 times in a year. You have it once, the immunity will be strong enough to prevent you even up to 10 years or a lifetime. Now, for coronaviruses, no, because you have it in January, by March, your immunity you develop from the natural infection has gone down. So even when you give a vaccine, the vaccine is going to imitate the natural immunity. All right? So it will go down. So even when these vaccines are being developed, the reason from the beginning some of them were given 2 doses, it's because they knew that naturally the immunity of coronaviruses wanes down after a period of time. And remember that some of them were being given 7, 21 days apart. And it was discovered that the further apart the doses are, the stronger and longer lasting the immunity response is. Now, if we repeat these doses, there's a likelihood that the immunity that you're going to develop is going to be lifelong. The same principle why we repeat the doses in children, it's so that they have a sustained immunity to actually last them. The majority of them is to last them just the childhood, all right? But some of them, like hepatitis B, if you give a 3 series dose of hepatitis B, somebody develops immunity for almost 20 to 40 years. So it's about understanding the virus that you're dealing with, all right, and how the vaccine has been made. So issues of doses should not really bother people. Let me give an example. You know, Dr. Mjajata, I'm sure you remember when writing your grade 7, all the female candidates were given an injection on the arm. Do you remember?
I remember that. I used to wonder why.
Aha. So if you remember, because of the high prevalence of tetanus then, and women, by the time they reach childbearing age, the goal is to prevent neonatal tetanus, these children being born to mothers who are susceptible. So you'll find that a woman was given a series of anti-tetanus, vaccine, so that they develop immunity not to have a child who is going to end up dying from tetanus. It was quite bad in the 80s. Now, if you remember very well, and I want females who were there in the 80s and 70s to be honest, tetanus was a series of 5 injections. 5. So you are given one and 4 booster doses. All right. So the science is the same. Okay. The science then and the science in the 21st century, it's the same. And it's just that we are living at different times where information is there. People now start doubting whether the science is correct. But the booster doses is not a new thing. It has existed. We still use it in childhood immunization. We used it in tetanus in adults. And now we are using it in COVID because we need a sustained, immune response to the virus.
On that tetanus note, let's take questions from people who've been following us attentively. I think I've exhausted my questions. If I have any question, I'll probably ask later. So to you guys, or to you people who are following to you who is following this conversation from the beginning, or you've just joined us, welcome. I'm hosting Dr. Mupeta today. We are discussing COVID. Basically, we are discussing the variants, the Omicron variant. Dr. Mupeta also commented on these travel bans and things like that. He also went through the vaccines and the benefits of the vaccines and things like that. So now, this is your chance to ask your question. So go ahead, type your question. Dr. Mupeta is here to answer the questions. My job tonight is just to read your questions and also to clarify the questions for the doctor to answer. As we wait for the questions from the audience, let me see if there's any question here. Okay, I think you were addressing this issue, but I'll put it up just for emphasis. I think you were actually explaining this now. But anyhow, repetition is the mother of education, so there's no harm in repeating ourselves. So Chanda Chilufya is asking, you've seen the question, Doc?
Yes.
So go ahead.
So how much are we going to need for COVID? The frank answer is that we don't know. What will determine, okay? Like I have said, immunity to coronaviruses, all of them is not lifelong. So you need several booster doses for you to sustain. Now, what will determine future doses is if you do 3 doses, how long will the immunity remain sustained? If it remains sustained for 2 years, then after 2 years, you need a booster dose. Now, if we are able to eliminate COVID now, okay, and then the immunity is able to live for about 3 years, what will happen is that when 3 years elapses where people will lose the immunity and this disease has been eliminated, then we'll never need booster doses, at that time. Like today, whoever gets, a vaccine for smallpox because it has been eliminated, all right? But if it wasn't, we could have actually been receiving doses for smallpox. So the goal is really to get a lot of people vaccinated so that we attain herd immunity and eliminate this disease so that come 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we won't be able to talk about COVID. Now, as long as we have certain pockets of people that are unvaccinated and not immune to the virus, then we'll keep on being vaccinated because definitely the immunity will keep on going up. After some time, it will go down. Then you need to boost it. So the booster doses will depend on how we effectively control COVID today.
Now, there's this language you're using, Doc. Okay, you're back.
I'm here.
There's this language you're using of the immunity going up and the immunity going down. I think that terminology needs to be clarified because there's a question here related to the same. Please explain well on the immunity being lowered. Is it the natural immunity being lowered? Okay. Have you seen this question, Doctor?
Yes, I have.
I think here we need to be very clear in trying to explain what we mean exactly, because the way I've understood Patricia's question, Patricia seems to suggest in her question that it's the entire immune system that is going down, meaning that you just remain open to other diseases as well. So when you're talking about the immune system going down, are you saying it's the immune defenses to COVID alone, or it's defenses in general? What are you talking about?
Thank you very much. And I think let's address Patricia's fears. I like giving examples to what happens in real life. Okay, let's look at the Zambian defense system. Okay, we've got how many barracks? So many barracks, eh? So we've got Arakan there near State House. We've got one commando in Mushili. There's Dagagan. There are so many barracks, eh? Now, if you remember, when in 1997, those who are students of history, will remember that when a certain military, official took over the reins of, governance in Zambia, all right, and seized power from the then president, there was a special unit of soldiers that was activated. I don't know if you remember. It's the commandos, and they came from Ndola, isn't it? And within a short period of time, the insurgents was actually, fought. That coup was fought. Now, did the Zambia defense system involve or make all the army barracks travel to Lusaka? No, just one special unit. So when you are looking at the entire immune system, you are looking at all these different barracks in the body. And the different barracks, these are called like lymph nodes, more or less like an analogy. So when an infection comes, there's a specialized immunity that is activated to take care of that particular disease, all right? Once the commandos diffused Captain Solo and his entire crew, did they remain in Lusaka? No, they went back to one commando barracks. Equally, that's what happens to the immunity, all right? When it comes, it defeats the disease, all right? Certain diseases like measles, okay, are so powerful that the soldiers will remain patrolling for a long time, probably until you die. That immunity remains towards measles, remains for a lifetime. Now, simple viruses like coronaviruses, okay? The immunity comes, takes care of it, because it's so simple, they go back to sleep in the barracks. So this is the immunity I'm talking about. The specific immunity targeted at COVID, all right? It goes up once it's, activated either by natural infection or by, by vaccine. I'll give like I said, you can get a cold 3 or 4 times a year. It's because the specific immunity against the cold is not sustained for a long time, because these viruses are not able to provoke the immunity for a long time, more than 3 to 6 months. So the immunity against COVID is there, and then it will go down. Now, when you vaccinate, the vaccine equally mimics the natural immunity. So it also goes up and goes down, because the virus we are dealing with does not require the immunity to remain activated for a long time. Now, what repeated doses do is to effectively transform this simple virus into this virus like measles, where if you give several doses of the the vaccine, the immunity remains sustained. Now, this immunity is particular to that. The same way the commandos, only those in Ndola came to defuse the coup in 1997. All right, we didn't use the other units. So that's how the immunity works. There's the entire immunity for the whole country, like a defense system. But if you have got a certain problem, you just particularly target that problem with one unit of soldiers. So this is the immunity we're talking about.
All right. Stephen Kangwa, Tumia, his question is, why are there so many types of vaccines? Is it because of different mechanisms of action, or is it lack of competence of some vaccines?
So it's because of the market forces and innovation, okay? So if we say there's a coronavirus today, okay, and we say this coronavirus looks like this because people have developed ways of making vaccines differently. Okay, it's not one size fits all. There is a vaccine. I'll give an example. How to kill a rat. All right, it's either you can use a catapult, huh? It's either you're going to use a trap. It's either you're going to use a cat. Okay, all those ways are innovative ways people come to achieve or to solve a problem. So equally, when you have got a disease, people in their ingenuity have actually discovered how to make vaccines in different ways. Okay, so if I find a way of killing a rat using a trap, Dr. Mjejachi are going to use a catapult, the next person is going to use a gun. The goal is that all of us are going to kill the rat. It doesn't mean that my method is incompetent. If it's able to kill, it's competent. All right. What if I don't like guns in my house? Why should I use guns? There's some people who don't like rat poison because they have got children in the house. They will use a trap. So equally, this is how vaccines are produced. You can't tell scientists that, no, we only want one method. Each scientist will develop the way they feel like they should, as long as it works, the world accepts.
Right. Now, this is related to this question. And this question has been coming up in different forms, by the way. The question is related to, of the many vaccines that we have on the market. Let's take the ones that you have in Zambia. Which one is the best? People keep asking this question.
Mm-hmm. So the best vaccine is the one that is able to achieve the primary goal, like I said, prevent deaths. So all the vaccines that we have in Zambia have been shown in clinical trials that they are able to prevent deaths with very high efficacy, including hospitalization. Some of them, actually most of them, gave 100%. Okay. Now, WHO had given these manufacturers and scientists to say the vaccine that we are going to accept should be able to reduce transmission by 50%. So any vaccine that you see WHO has approved, it means it has passed the 50% mark. Therefore, it's a best vaccine. So there will be, no one will say, this is, of course, the level to which they excite the immunity differs. But if we start looking at that and looking at the fact that we are in a pandemic, the 50% prevention of infection is what we should look at. And therefore, if a vaccine meets the cut, then it's a vaccine that you should take. So be rest assured that all the vaccines which have been approved in Zambia have been pre-qualified by WHO, and therefore it makes them to be the best vaccine available, and you should be able to receive it.
Please, this is Nasirele. Please talk about the dangers of infertility with these vaccines. Do these vaccines have any effect on people's ability to have children?
No, there is actually no evidence at the moment. Actually, there is a bit of evidence showing that COVID can actually affect testicles in the males. So we don't know what the long-term effect of COVID in the testicles is going to be. But if you are able to find COVID in the testes and you don't find the vaccine in the testes, so you are more likely to think the COVID infection itself is more dangerous. Now, whether females or males, the vaccines have not been shown to affect infertility.
Are you saying that COVID is likely to make men impotent?
We don't know, but we've been able to isolate the virus in human testes.
So the virus is now also affecting male testicles.
It's not surprising. If you look at measles is able to go to the testes. So a respiratory virus like COVID, it's not something new that would be surprised if we find it there. It happens already with some other respiratory viruses, and measles can cause what is called otitis. And otitis, this is where the testicles, if it's severe, it can be damaged, and the person will be able to who been capable of producing, semen and therefore important. Now, we don't know exactly, or the clinical effects of SARS-CoV-2 being found in semen and in some human testes. Otherwise, it hasn't been associated yet with otitis like measles does, so we can't absolutely say, but these are areas of active study, and we should be able to have a concrete, answer whether it's a bystander in the testis or whether it's causing, problems.
Let's address a few concerns before we end the program. The first concern is this one. I have allergies. He doesn't say what he's allergic to. How safe are these vaccines for him?
Yeah, so it's always important that the type of allergy is, elucidated. And normally, severe allergies makes you end up in hospital. And I can tell you they can be quite dangerous and almost deadly. Now, people who have such allergies, trust me, they know it. The majority of the people actually have got minor, discomfort or reactions to either food or what. But what is important is to determine exactly what sort of allergy that you have. Some of this vaccine, the compound that is, in the vaccine is similar to the compound that is found in eggs. All right. So if you have got allergy to eggs, please present to the vaccination center. Tell the healthcare worker that you have got allergy to eggs, and then they will be able to determine whether it's safe for you to receive or not. The majority of the people, including allergic to cats or blah, blah, might really be inconsequential, but always say it the first time you present at the vaccination center, and the health center, staff will be able to determine whether you can safely receive or not. Don't give yourself an allergy and stay home. Go, be evaluated, and then you'll be advised accordingly.
The next concern, doctor, comes from Charity here. So Charity is asking, hello, doctor, is the vaccine safe in pregnant women?
Yes, it is. We have got a number of pregnant women who have received the vaccine, and there hasn't been any concerns yet. So the side effects are really minor, just like it is in women who are not pregnant. So it is safe.
Breastfeeding mothers?
Safe as well. They can receive it as well.
Okay.
It has got no consequence on the baby. It has got no consequence on milk production. It has got only the fact that it's able to provide immunity, which is normally lowered during pregnancy and breastfeeding in women, who are at risk of COVID.
Next concern, cardiovascular disease. Is the vaccine safe with someone who has angina?
All right. So there have been a few vaccines, the mRNA, which have been associated with myocarditis. Now, this is really in the younger population below the vaccination age in Zambia. So if you are an adult, you have got heart disease, actually you are more at risk of developing COVID than the effects from the vaccine. So at the moment, the vaccines that we have in Zambia and the population we are vaccinating, they are not at risk of developing any heart disease with the vaccines. So if you are above 18, please go and get vaccinated with or without angina. This vaccine are actually safe.
Now, there's a concern surrounding booster shots. I need you to clarify that. Are we likely to receive booster shots in Zambia for the vaccines? For example, I'm fully vaccinated and I got both my first and second dose of AstraZeneca. I know people are getting Johnson & Johnson right now. There's also a bit of excitement around Pfizer and the other vaccine, the one from China, which is also just as good. Now, are we likely to get booster shots afterwards?
Very likely. Now, this is my opinion as an infectious disease specialist based on the knowledge and things that I've studied about this, virus. So very likely Zambia is likely going to make such a move. But at the moment, probably what's holding us back is we haven't vaccinated enough people for us to start making them go around, 3 times or 4 times. So the primary goal is really to have a lot of people develop as little immunity they can from the doses available before we could actually start, going around. But if you were in a resource-rich country, even after receiving, 2 doses and there's a third dose being given, I would not stand in your way for you to get a booster dose. I, for one, if I'm given an opportunity for a booster dose, it's been 6 months since I received my second dose, I'll definitely go for it. Because, like I said, based on the science that we know about coronaviruses, the immunity wins. And the evidence at the moment is showing that the immunity from vaccines, 2 doses, is likely going to win after about 6 months. So the 6 month marks the period, opportune period for you to get another booster dose. This is also not new. I'll give an example of, flu shots. Seasonal flu in the Western world, especially in the US, doses are given every year. Those are actually booster doses. They are not new doses. All right. And the reason is that you lose immunity as the virus keeps on developing new strains. The same way we are talking about variants on concern, with a seasonal flu, it's every year there's a new variant. And you need to get a vaccine every year. All right. Failure to which you'll be susceptible like you never got vaccinated. So let's start using the science of things that already exists and, learning experiences of countries that are already receiving booster vaccines every year for some of the respiratory viruses. It's not strange and nobody should lie to you. It's something that already happens. The majority of people in the US, if you are going to visit the US during this period, they'll mandate you to get a flu shot. No negotiations about it. They won't be like, no, this is what they'll tell you. If you can't get the flu shot, please don't come to the US.
Right. Now, it's interesting that you talked about mandatory vaccination for flu in the US. There's a huge debate back home here about mandatory vaccination with COVID. I'll get your comment on that at the end. But I want to ask a follow-up question to what you just said about booster shots. So if, say, somebody, when you're boosting, can they boost with a different vaccine or they will just boost with the same vaccine? Say somebody had J&J previously and they're about to boost. Can they boost with Pfizer or can they boost with AstraZeneca, or they just have to boost with the same vaccine they had prior?
So the primary is to boost with the primary, the initial vaccine that you got. However, there's now evidence that has shown that it's safe to cross between AstraZeneca and Pfizer. So if you got AstraZeneca, it is shown to be safe that you can receive Pfizer, or Moderna safely. Now, if the time comes for us to start giving booster doses in Zambia, a policy or a regulation is going to be given to which ones you can cross to. But this, what I'm talking about, is in countries where it's being done. But whereas the case for Zambia, this hasn't been given, and we should wait until Ministry of Health issued such, a policy, and then people could know which ones will be safe. But elsewhere, Pfizer and AstraZeneca are being crossed.
Right. Now, there's this one here. How do you deal with conspiracy theories? Because at present moment, everyone has his own theory about COVID. Everyone has his own theory about the vaccines. Now, there's also the religious side of it, and there's quite a lot out there that is obtaining regarding to COVID. And also, sometimes the way politicians have behaved around this disease has also helped to put more fire into the conspiracy theories. So now, I think Tolosi here is onto something, and I kind of agree. And can we address this question? How then do we handle these conspiracy theories? Because there are many, and some of them sound very convincing.
The Bible says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. The only way to fight conspiracy is with, correct information, accurate knowledge, and making sure that this knowledge is free, publicly available, and resourced. Now, most of us, we like getting information from whatever websites. We like getting information from messages that are forwarded on WhatsApp. All those should be treated as conspiracy, as inaccurate as they can be. The only source that you can reliably, rely on at the moment in Zambia is, number one, the Ministry of Health website, Facebook page that has got accurate information that has been verified by a number of experts at country level. The second one at Africa regional level is Africa CDC website. That also releases from time to time information on the virus, how it's moving, and what's true or what's not true. The third one, which is now even at global level, is the WHO, the World Health Organization websites, Twitter, and Facebook, of which almost on a daily basis, there are press briefings from WHO to talk about what's true and what's not. Anything else, including media outlets, including international media outlets, can actually mislead. Remember, the goal of an editor is to sell. So for us who like just reading, a screaming headline, there's a likelihood that we'll actually be misled than what really is true. So if you need accurate news, accurate information, visit the sites that I've said, for me, which are very reliable. The other ones, take them with a pinch of salt, including forwarded messages on WhatsApp. So if you see, the other thing we need to do, if you see a message being forwarded on Facebook, on WhatsApp, check these sites I've told you. If they are silent, then just wait. And if they haven't said anything, then treat that information with the contempt it deserves. If it's so big to shake the world, just trust me that these institutions I've mentioned, they are going to issue a circular, and then get that circular and reply to the information that you received, especially if it's contrary to what the circular said. That's how you fight conspiracy.
Now, there's this issue that keeps coming up that, as medical practitioners, I think this is an issue that we need to keep clarifying, because I think that there's this issue where there's a mismatch between what we actually do as doctors and what the community expects of us, or what the community thinks that we do. And that is embedded in this particular comment or question that Mr. Mhango has asked. His question is, as Zambian medical practitioners, are you going to agree to everything that has been put on the table by your friends, or you are doing research on these vaccines yourselves?
So, very important question. I'll particularly talk about medical doctors, all right? Training in the US to become a doctor is 4 years. How long does it take, Dr. Mjajati, for you to be in school?
Well, it took me 7 for my first degree.
Did we just take it because the US trained for 4 years, let's train for 4 years? No, all right? So what you should know that equally, even the people that we produce are able to independently reason, independently evaluate information, and make a decision based on the Zambian scenario, what is going to be best for the Zambian people. All right? Remember that South Africa, did ban AstraZeneca early on. Did Zambian scientists agree with that thought? No, we went ahead and gave AstraZeneca. What happened to South African scientists? Later on, they reversed and they started giving AstraZeneca. Did we just agree because South Africa is richer than us? We should know. In the US, AstraZeneca is not, given authority. Did we say because the US has refused AstraZeneca, let's refuse? No. We evaluated the evidence based on what was going to be best for the Zambian people. So we don't do copy and paste. All right. There are people, Mr. Muhango, who wake up, whose job is to actually read and evaluate the data and apply it to what is in the country. When we are not sure, then we say, can we conduct a research? If we are sure with the evidence presented before us, repeating such a research will be an academic exercise, and you don't start experimenting on people when you know something already works. So to answer the question, no, we don't. We've got independent minds, well qualified, just as competent as they can be in the US, in South Africa, or the UK.
I think in addition to what you've said, Doc, I think there's also something that needs to be said about the ecosystem in which doctors operate. Doctors operate in an ecosystem that is so well connected internationally that when data is released in one region about something that has happened, information is shared globally. Yeah. So I think that's one aspect about our profession that we need to keep repeating, that we live in a profession where information is freely shared. Scientific information is not hidden. We don't operate in secrecy, as it were. So if someone has discovered the way Omicron was discovered in South Africa, it was openly shared in the scientific community. And that's how science has evolved, through open sharing. I don't know which background you are from or what profession you come from, but in our profession, information is freely shared. And then we don't repeat what has already been proven elsewhere, usually. Do we? Well, sometimes we do, but rarely.
Rarely. It's what we call an adaptation process. If we have got any concerns whether something is going to be acceptable by the Zambian population, then we say, let's test it if it will be acceptable. But if it has been shown that even people who are similar to the Zambian population will accept it, there's no need to start experimenting with that. The other thought I wanted to say about, the medical profession is that, like you have said, information is easily shared amongst peers, and whichever part of the world. So we don't hide information from each other. All right. And then just a caution that I've seen, just within the profession, the confidence of the public is being eroded, because today anybody called a doctor has become an authority, for the pandemic. There's no shame in saying, I don't know, or let me consult. It actually shows strength. If you are to come to me and ask me about heart surgery, I'm definitely going to tell you I've got no idea. All right. If you come and ask me, how I can, amputate a leg or something so complex surgery, I am not, because it's beyond my competences. All right. I'm not an operative doctor. I cannot operate. Probably the only thing I can operate on is an abscess. All right. Because that's basic. But if you tell me, open up someone's heart, open up someone's brain, can you make, this eye operation? I can't. Probably I would even pass out. And there's no shame in me saying that I can't. And the public should know that medicine now is highly specialized. It's not every doctor that is going to give you the information. And if you are that health practitioner who feels like you've got no boundaries, you better really, introspect and see what sort of service you are giving to the public. Because we have now started having people pitting, professionals, against each other, who is giving the correct, who is what is more competent, who is more popular. This is not a popularity contest. It's the lives of people that we are talking about. There's no shame in keeping quiet when you don't know. There's no shame in saying, let me consult. And there's no shame in saying, this doctor is better suited to handle such kind of, information. Yeah.
Doc, address this issue. It keeps coming up. Sickle cell disease and vaccinations. Are there any contraindications?
No, sicklers are actually at risk of various invasive diseases, all right, and therefore for them to get a vaccine will be a plus. So there's no contraindication to sickle cell.
This last one is very interesting. I didn't know there was such a thing. Why some Zambian medical practitioners they fear to take? They are afraid of taking the vaccine. I wasn't aware that some Zambian practitioners are not taking the vaccine. What's the story?
Yeah. So if it was an audience addressing, medical practitioners, I would have cracked a joke. But I'm going to refrain from that because these are some of the jokes we joke between surgeons and physicians. And I think Dr. Mjajat, you're well aware. Okay, let me address this. Okay, a doctor is a human being. A doctor is made up of emotions. A doctor is made up of fears. And equally are other medical practitioners. They are also coming from the same communities where we are coming from, where there are different religious beliefs, where there are, different beliefs, witchcraft, 666, aliens coming. They come from the same community and they have been raised up in the same background. And sometimes when somebody takes, or makes us take a back seat and let their beliefs overtake them, definitely they are going to have these concerns. And then there are certain doctors or medical practitioners who will genuinely question because they haven't really grasped the science behind it. All right. And they'll say, okay, until I see such an evidence, then they'll stay away. Not because they have discovered something really hidden and they want now to caution. No, it's just the makeup of people, all right? And they come in the same backgrounds that we come from. And it's very sad that, we've got less than 50% of health workers who have been vaccinated in Zambia. And I think at the last time I checked statistics, it was standing something like 30%. This doesn't actually give confidence, and people actually see what we are doing, And if the first person to tell you a lumbar puncture kills is a doctor or a nurse, imagine what will come up of the public. So we really need, and this is an appeal to health workers, is that, yes, you may have all these fears as a person, but remember your basics training. Remember your basics. So if you know what a vaccine does and you learned from the first year what a vaccine is and what sort of vaccines we have used to eradicate disease, that should be your basis. That should be your strength. But over and over, there are health workers who are actually just afraid of injections. So I would actually find that to be
I don't like injections, Doc, but I got the vaccine.
It's possible. Well, maybe you even cried. We don't know.
Yeah. But I needed the vaccine. I needed the vaccine.
Of injections.
Yeah, I don't like injections, but I needed the vaccine, so I got the vaccine. Now, Doc,
yes,
we are going to close on this note. Back home here, I know you're in Lesotho, but here in Lusaka, there's a big argument in Zambia on should the vaccine be mandatory or not. Now, the government, through Minister of Health, issued a very interesting statement regarding issues to do with the vaccine and regarding public health issues, where it was said that you will not be allowed to enter a government building if you're not vaccinated. And if you're a civil servant, you may not be allowed to attend work if you're not vaccinated for the sake of others. Now, that has been interpreted to mean that government is now forcing people to get vaccinated. Should vaccination be made mandatory, especially vaccination relating to COVID?
Well, thank you very much. So I'll answer it by giving examples and also as a medical doctor. and also as a public health, approach. So let me start first of all as a medical practitioner and the tenets of medical ethics. So there is no medical intervention that actually can be forced on a person who is capable of making a competent decision. Am I back? Yeah.
You are.
So let this sink. Yeah, let this sink. Medical tenets, all right, says that no medical intervention should be forced on anyone who is competent to make a decision. All right. But for a person to make a competent decision, they have to be provided with information, not just information, the correct information. So if the majority of the people are getting information from Facebook, we cannot say that they have made a competent decision. That's number one. And we should be careful. So we really need to determine what is the level of knowledge about COVID vaccine for us to know that the decisions people are making to get or to refuse a vaccine is competent enough. As long as the majority are just getting every information from whatever, we can actually deem them not to have received a competent or not to be competent enough to make a decision. Now, in the medical practice, if you as a practitioner, you are able to determine that your patient cannot make a competent decision, you have got two, action points. The first one is either you go to the judge and get, a court permission to administer that treatment or intervention because you would have proved that that person is not competent. Two, you can use your discretion as a doctor if there is no kin or what's this? What do you call kin? What? Next of kin.
Next of kin.
Next of kin to make a competent decision on behalf of that patient. Then as a practitioner, you can make that decision on behalf of your patient. Now, this is what we use mostly in children, all right? So children are not competent to make a decision naturally. So we use the next of kin, which is usually the parent or the guardian. And that's why consent for a vaccine in children is by a parent, okay? Now, so let's now get to, just as an example, childhood vaccination. There are certain schools who tell you for you to register your child at this school, you have to show us an under 5. If your child doesn't have an under 5, what do the school's authorities do? They'll decline. So what exactly have they done? They haven't forced you, but they have said a policy here to protect other children, okay, of which it's entrusted in us as school management. We'll ask you to stay away, go and find another school where you'll be admitted and where they don't care about protection of other children. So inadvertently, because we need to take our children to school, all right, some of the parents have had to make a decision based on that. But the majority of the parents, I'm glad, take their children for vaccination because they know they work and they prevent a lot of childhood illnesses. Okay, that's the example we have from experience. Now, let's come to, adulthood immunization. So by nature, we expect every reasonable adult to be able to make a competent decision. Now, remember what I said, underlying competent. Competent decision is based on information provided, all right? Now, information provided should be understood. If a person fails to understand, then it means they're not competent. And the same way we deal with incompetent minors to make a decision is how we should make, a decision for these adults who are incompetent in making a decision. All right. Now, why do we make that? Remember, I told you at the beginning, the most important benefit of a vaccine is not personal, it's at a community level. All right. So the reason we need to make a competent decision for these individuals who can't understand is to protect the community. All right. Now, it's also now the onus is on us as health practitioners to provide correct information in a language and manner that is simple. We say in communication that should be understood by a person in 5th grade. So we are not supposed to use jargon. We have to simplify it. And that's why some of us use these examples like soldiers and whatever, so that even the simplest mind of an adult will be able to understand. All right. So that they will be able to make a competent decision. Now, that's on us as a medical practitioner, and that's how we make a decision whether to force or enforce a certain intervention or whether to withhold. So it's about competence. If I'm able to determine that this person, despite providing the information, they still refuse and they are competent in their refusal, I will leave them. I won't give the vaccine because I know that I've done everything possible and they have made a competent decision. So there will be no enforcement. Now, let's come to the public health approach, okay? So yes, you've got the right, all right, even from the medical side, to accept or refuse any intervention. But now there's a government that comes in, and government exists to protect its citizens. All right. So there is, yes, the constitution, and then there are certain acts of parliament that brings the constitution to life. So there's what we call a Public Health Act. So the Public Health Act mandates the government to enter any institution, building, whether private or what, for the purpose of determining whether there is a threat in that environment. So if you've got a house and there's a public health, act in force, and there is reasonable, suspicion that you might be harboring an infectious disease, you lose the right to privacy because there is the law that mandates government to do that. Now, equally, we see that during the coming of COVID, there was SI number 21 and 22 that actually gave expanded power to the government to actually make certain interventions. So when the government says for us to protect children in a school, the way they say other children should actually show a vaccination card, they can equally, using this law, tell teachers that for you to come and teach at this school, all right, we need you to be vaccinated against COVID. It's up to you as a teacher to work at that school or not. There's no infringement of your right. But what the government is doing is using the law to protect members of the public. So we have to understand the two things, the Public Health Act and subsequent statutory instrument that can be issued, all right, versus individual rights and where they end. So equally, but I know that government didn't say mandatory. It has clarified that it's voluntary, but it's moving to protect certain vulnerable individuals who have competently made a decision to get vaccinated from those who have competently made a decision not to vaccinate. All right. So this is where the two meet or differ. So at a personal level, as a medical practitioner, the first thing I have to determine is competence to make a decision. If there is incompetence to make that decision, I'll move on and enforce that intervention. At the public health level, the government moves to protect the vulnerable. And that's why it can issue certain, pronouncements and statutory instruments to protect. They won't say, get it. If you don't get it, we'll do this. They'll say that if you don't get vaccinated, we will not allow you to mingle with these vulnerable people for the purpose of protecting them from that infectious disease. So I think we have to understand the decision by government. It's meant to protect the vulnerable, and it's not mandating anyone to go and get the jab, but it's telling you that certain places won't be accessible to you.
I'm going to push you against the wall.
Yeah,
I'm going to
although
pressure you
it's
here. I'm going to
me.
pressure you here. Should government hold its position that people who are unvaccinated should not access certain places?
So
I'm asking this question, Dr. Mpeta, in the light of COVID-19 as a disease itself.
so
Because for example, you gave an example of under 5 cards with enrollment in schools. Some schools, they will not enroll your child until you show them that your child completed vaccinations.
exactly.
Okay. Now, extrapolate that to public health and the protection of the public. Should a government hold its position and say, the same way we do not allow you to enroll children who are not vaccinated, we do not want people to access certain places, certain public places, including employees who are not vaccinated? Should government hold that position? I know I'm pushing you
Um,
against the wall.
it's a very big war, actually, between a hard surface and the rock, I would say. So I'll answer it, in two ways. All right. I'm not really a legal, expert on this, and I'll leave the lawyers to interpret what it means. But let me answer it from a public health, point and perspective. All right, like I've said, government is mandated to protect its citizens. All right, and where we have determined that, I'll give an example, that air travel is a risk, I think we need to impose, instead of just looking at the tests now, let's look at mandating that the travelers should have at least, vaccines. If we look at local travel, which can also be a risk, people, they are more concerned, about just a mask, but we've got different preventive measures. So I would say from a public health point of view, we need to start protecting the vulnerable. And where are the vulnerable found? The vulnerable are found in hospitals, in schools, universities, in public places, all right? In public places, that's where the majority of the people, get infected. Markets, you remember the first outbreak had a very high correlation to the market, all right? So those are the public places that really we need to protect the vulnerable. And some incentivizing, the first step in having a lot of public health intervention is providing an incentive. All right. Now, an incentive could be a monetary form or benefits, or certain access, that people who are not vaccinated may not. So those are incentives. So what we are saying to government on a public health point of view is, let's incentivize vaccinations if we have to really, end, this pandemic. There will be a lot of people who are naysayers. There will be a lot of people who give legal opinions, but we should, as a people and government, really look at protection of the community and whether that person really needs to belong or have certain access, to the community if they don't want to participate in programs aimed at protecting the community. So it is really, really not a simple yes or no answer, but the basic tenets should actually be tied to what is the community benefit. How are we going to incentivize the protection of the community? If we find that giving a bag of mealie meal is an incentive enough, let's give. I visited one company on the Copper Belt, and one worker told me, I didn't get the vaccine because our CEO offered us, a voucher in ShopRite. I was like, I would be thrilled because that's incentivizing you being a member of this community. All right. It should not, why would an employer give you an incentive if it's something that's going to make you die? You die, the company loses out because they have to pay funeral grants. There will be a worker who is going to be lost. So really, we have to remove these fears of certain acts of gratitude or gesture to incentivize vaccinations. So Let government incentivize the vaccination. That's number one. Two, let government increase access. Take the vaccine to where the people are. When was the last time you saw a vaccine, truck just pulls up from nowhere and starts, giving information and people get it? Let's take, the vaccine to where the people are. Let's incentivize, being vaccinated, so that, certain, people who think they have made a competent decision not to will realize that certain benefits of belonging to a society will only be accessible to them if they participate in ending this pandemic.
Right. Now, when it comes to the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated on the side of the government, one of the things that governments probably need to start explaining very clearly to the people is the economic impact that the unvaccinated have on the government's pocket. Because you see, the idea behind vaccination is that you want to reduce hospitalization. You also want to reduce deaths. Meaning that if you have a huge population which is not vaccinated and you are hit by the wave, essentially it means that you are going to have a lot of people who are going to be hospitalized. And the hospitalization or hospital care is very expensive on the government. And deaths are very expensive, not just on the government, but also on the individual families. It's very expensive to host a funeral, to bury people. So, and I think that's one aspect that also needs to be explained in full, that when you're looking at it from the government perspective, as a government, if I'm talking as a government, if I were government, I would want to vaccinate as many people as possible to avoid too much hospitalization. Because as we saw from the third wave, hospitalization was very expensive. Oxygen was in short supply, not very quickly. We ran out of space very quickly. Doctors and nurses were overwhelmed very quickly. We were even losing doctors and nurses in the process. What's your take on that, Doc?
Yeah, you've brought in a very important aspect that I was supposed to tie to incentive. Okay. Healthcare is costly. Every intervention costs money. Let me give an example. All right. To receive a vaccine, it's 60 kwacha. At the current price we are getting, AstraZeneca. All right. 60 kwacha. To do a COVID test, it's about 1,000 kwacha. So look at the difference, 940 kwacha. Now, who is going to pay for this difference? A vaccine costs 960 kwacha or more less to somebody testing you for COVID. So prevention versus, curing, first of all, making a diagnosis, and just that, the entry for the point of care, the other tests. And like you said, people who had COVID, they ended up having critical disease. Some of them, in 2-3 weeks, they were being made to pay over 100,000. Okay. That's a huge cost. That's almost, above the annual pay of the majority of civil servants, 100,000. Now, one way we should incentivize vaccination is just to simply pass on the costs of not getting a vaccine to, the people who have refused to get a vaccine. I'll give an example. Instead of saying, don't enter in this space, all right? I would advise the Ministry of Health, just put COVID tests. You've got a vaccine, hey, the government spent $4 on you, 60 kwacha, get in. Oh, no, I don't have, I feel like I shouldn't get vaccinated. That's okay, fine, come in, but here's a COVID test. Show us you don't have COVID so that you can mingle freely. And then that cost of 1,000 is passed on to you. How many of us are going to manage paying 1,000 to go for work? 30,000.
I like your idea. I think the idea you've brought is actually very good, Doc. Exactly. To say that fine. Don't get vaccinated if you don't want to get vaccinated. It's okay. I mean, retain your rights. But at the same time, show us that you don't have COVID.
Yes. And this is already being implemented in air travel. You can't travel.
Yeah, I mean, I just traveled the other
COVID.
day. I had to be tested a few weeks
Exactly.
ago. I had
Did
to
you
be
say,
tested.
no, it's my right? They'll say it's our
It's
plane.
my right to travel.
They won't tell you, oh, yeah, you're vaccinated or not. They'll say, yes, you have got the right to go to any country. It's our plane. And in our plane, show us you don't have COVID. And is it cheap, Dr. Mjajat?
Now, I paid a lot of money for that travel certificate. Yeah.
So instead of that cost being borne by government, all right, we can pass it on to the people who refuse. It's their right to refuse, and it's their right to show us that we don't have to be afraid of them. So the only thing, if such a decision is made, is to make sure that the testing points are available. The reagents for testing are available, because it makes no sense to pass a certain policy where, again, there will be no access to that. So as we are thinking round on how to, pass on the costs for the people who want to uphold their right to refuse, let's also ensure that there's access, ease of access to testing facilities, ease of access to vaccinations, and vaccines being available. I know that at the moment, vaccines are not a problem in Zambia. And the target by government to vaccinate 2 million by Christmas Day is really commendable, because if we look at past experiences, we really expect to start seeing a wave round about Christmas time. And during Christmas time, people want to mingle with family, with friends. So there will be a lot of, dropping the guard with regards to, social distancing, masking, and all these other preventive measures. So we really expect that cases are going to surge during that period. But if we have the majority of the people vaccinated, we are going to avert the catastrophe that we saw during last Christmas, or the catastrophe we saw during the third wave.
Right. So, Doc, it's been a very interesting conversation, and
Almost
we could
2
go
hours.
on and on and on and on. I've seen that a few people have just joined us. They may have missed a lot of things that we discussed. I've seen a lot of questions that are repeating, a lot of information that we have already addressed. So if you've just joined us and you have the time, we will leave this video on. You can play it back. You will see that a lot of issues that you're raising now, for you who may have just joined, we've already addressed them. I've already seen somebody who's asking, if you were vaccinated, why were you tested for COVID again? But remember, we discussed this at the very beginning. We've said that the vaccine does not prevent you from catching the disease. That's not the purpose of the vaccine. Please, please, please don't mix issues. The vaccine does not prevent you from catching the disease. The vaccine is intended to prevent death. And the vaccine is intended to also prevent hospitalization. So you will still get infected even if you're vaccinated. That is why we are saying that the unvaccinated, and people keep saying, why should the vaccinated be protected from the unvaccinated? It is because even if I'm vaccinated, I'll still get infected. Understand that. And I think people are missing that point, Dr. Mpeta. Please go over that as we close.
Yeah, so like you have said, the primary benefit of the vaccine is to prevent death. And that's why human exists, and that's why public health exists. The second one, which is prevention of disease, is basically secondary, and those are secondary benefits of a vaccine. And I think I went through the stages of how desirable a vaccine becomes and what sort of additional benefits it will give you. I'll give an example of if you buy a car. If you buy a car, you are going to have the benefit of arriving at work early, all right? But does it mean that you can never be late? It's possible a tree would fall on the road, you'll be blocked, there could be traffic, you'll be late, all right? Equally, the vaccine will give you the benefit of being protected from getting infected, but there will be certain circumstances, like a tree falling on the road, that can make you susceptible to an infection even when you are vaccinated. And that's why you see part of the incentive is saying if you are vaccinated, you can actually access most of the public spaces. But if you are not, we are suggesting that probably you be tested so that we are sure, because we know some of the additive benefits of being vaccinated is that even when you are infected, the likelihood of you passing on the infection to the next person is significantly reduced. You can, but significantly reduced compared to one who is not vaccinated. So the benefits are a lot. And if they are taken together, then you'll find that, they become a huge and triple effect benefit compared to if you pick out one, then it will be very difficult to understand in that context. So yes, you can get infected with a vaccine, but the cost the infection will take is absolutely mild and at best nothing compared to one who is not vaccinated.
Dr. Mpeta, as we close, what is your final message to the people who've been with us throughout this conversation? And what's your final message to our fellow Zambians with regards to COVID and vaccinations?
So it's very possible to end a pandemic. All it needs are global and country and community efforts in ensuring that we understand what this disease is and how we can prevent it. So the primary goal is to understand the disease, how it's transmitted, and how we can prevent it. Second, we need to look at preventive measures, and the most effective way of preventing an infectious disease in the 21st century has been vaccination. There is no infectious disease that has been, eradicated without vaccination. So only through vaccinations can we eradicate most of this, especially this infectious disease of pandemic potential. Now, we know that viruses have got the potential to emerge and re-emerge. And if we actually remain resilient and develop immunity at the same time, which is through vaccinations, then we end the pandemic, all right? Zambia is faced with a lot of health challenges and pressures, and we don't need, this pandemic to prolong. We need to get back our economy together. We need to get our lives together back and ensure that we do what, we do as humans and live life to fulfilling. And equally on this day, which is World AIDS Day, it is possible to end HIV in this generation if we look at the effective way of preventing HIV. So there are various ways now that can prevent HIV. And please always make sure that you, visit your health facilities. And of note for those who are infected already is that there is effective antiretroviral treatment that exists that will reduce your viral load and make you incapable of transmitting to the next person. And this is all we are asking for. There is the knowledge out there. There is the information of what works. Let's embrace what works, and let's have trust in our scientists over our emotions, over our fears, because the reason why they are there and existing is to ensure that they contribute to the welfare and well-being and health of individuals and communities in Zambia and also at a global stage, as a whole. Thank you very much for the invitation, Dr. Njidati. It's always a pleasure to, interact with you and your audience, and I look forward for the next time when I'll be invited.
Dr. Mpeta, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And this is December, so we invite you again to come and discuss the issues relating to HIV. For now, good night and take care, Doc.
All right, good night. Thank you very much.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We were discussing COVID with Dr. Mpeta. We'll ask you to do us one small favor before you leave. Please click that share button. We need this information out there as much as possible. And continue to ask questions and throw in questions in the comment section, and we'll pass on some of these questions. If we need to come back and clarify some of your questions, we can always come back and clarify. Dr. Mpeta can also be invited to come back, or I can come back and answer the questions, or can bring another doctor to answer the questions. So please go ahead and leave the questions in the comments, and also share your own opinions. Like we keep saying, you are free to disagree with what we post or what we say, provided you use, palatable language in the process. But as much as possible, please feel free to share your opinion. This is a free platform. We do not restrict what you say. We don't censor what you say. We only ask that you do not use vulgar language in your posting. So please share this video as much as possible before you leave. And we will see you next time, and do take care and continue to drink water.